Our expert panelists joining us today are Dr. Richard Palmquist, integrative veterinarian and owner of Centinela Animal Hospital. He's an author, lecturer, and teacher. Dr. Christina Chambreau, internationally known homeopathic veterinarian, lecturer, and teacher. Joan Ranquet, animal communicator, teacher, author, lecturer, and owner of Communication with All Life University. And Brendan Golia, professional pet trainer, behavior expert, and owner of OC Canine Coaching. Welcome to Smart Pet Talk. I'm your host, Anna DeVere. For over 20 years, Mark Faulkner has been committed to leveraging the power of science to help everyone live their healthiest and most active lives, human and animal. He's an avid inventor and innovator who holds more than a dozen patents. His goal is to revolutionize global health through innovation in the nutraceutical and biochemistry markets. Mark co-founded a forensic toxicology lab that specialized in athletic drug testing. The lab's original staff developed the steroid testing program for the National Football League, many Olympians, and NCAA athletes. His passion, research, and a team of scientists resulted in numerous findings, one that has been called by doctors one of the most significant innovations in pain management in the past 30 years, known as Alpha G. Mark, welcome to the show. What an honor and a privilege to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm certainly honored to be here and enthused to get to spend some time with you.
Thank you. Dr. Palmquist, I know you'd like to open up with a few questions today.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important as we talk about this, because a lot of the viewers are not, PhDs and cellular biologists, and I spend my whole day drilling around in there. And I think we need to explain some really basic terminology before we start to talk about what your product is and how revolutionary that makes it. So could we actually talk in very broad terms for lay people who are watching the show to explain what these compounds are that most non-steroidal anti-inflammatories work on, the COX and LOX system, COX and LOX. Can we explain what that is and what a mitochondria is? And then we can actually better contrast what's happening if people understand that that's how the pain is being relieved. Oh, and one more thing. Explain to people what a peptide is.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I don't know how many days we have to talk here on this show, but I could spend a lot of time talking about a lot of those things. Those are subjects that fascinate me and that I'm glad are part of the content today. But in a nutshell, let's start kind of with the last topic first. A peptide. A peptide is an amino acid based molecule in the body. Lots of different types of peptides, lots of different sizes, short chain peptides, long chain. But peptides do an amazing amount of activities in the body. And the properties that peptides exhibit in the body are incredibly varied. Some peptides have certain molecular characteristics, others have something surprising and totally different. And what we found with this particular peptide called Alpha G, for which we were doing research in the fitness industry, in the performance enhancement drug industry, or performance enhancement compound industry, was that it was anti-inflammatory. We thought it would help athletes run faster and jump higher or something, lift more weights, have more endurance. And we thought it could be a safe, legal, healthy replacement or alternative to steroids that these athletes were using, and that they claimed, hey, they help us do our job. So if you're going to take them away from us, fine, we get it that they're unhealthy, illegal, etc. But find us something that works, because nothing else works. So we worked on research for performance enhancement, and this particular peptide that we had great hopes for doing something for the athletes failed in that regard. But you always, when you're doing research, you gather other data, and we would ask, well, did you notice anything else that was out of the norm, or that was not part of your regular routine. And we repeatedly started hearing from people, oh, well, yeah, my shoulder stopped hurting, or my back wasn't aching, or my knee wasn't bothering me or something. And we thought, that's interesting. So with enough of that, we started altering our research and looking at it as possibly a novel, unexpected anti-inflammatory, anti-pain compound, which then we knew, okay, the mechanism of action doesn't appear to be like a COX or a LOX inhibitor, which ibuprofen, naproxen, all of those are drugs that are COX inhibitors, or disease-modifying agents are LOX, usually inhibitors. But the cyclooxygenase or COX compound in the body is what is responsible for all sorts of things, protecting your kidneys, protecting your stomach, a number of things. But it also helps to regulate prostaglandin release, and prostaglandins are what end up causing inflammation when there's either some injury or some reactive oxygen species or oxidative stress. And so a COX inhibitor like ibuprofen or like naproxen, which is Aleve, those things downregulate COX, so it downregulates prostaglandins, which means it downregulates inflammation and pain. There's a lot of really interesting research about kind of some of the ways that happens in the side effects of it. But long story short, alpha G works upstream from the chemical cascade that involves COX or cyclooxygenase. And rather than doing something that inhibits part of the body's natural processes, it actually works in a way to stabilize or to act as a pro-inflammatory compound by stabilizing the mitochondria, increasing oxygen reserves, and helping the mitochondrial membrane. And for people who don't know what a mitochondria is, it's the engine of every cell. And if that engine in the cell isn't working properly, if it's not running well, then the whole cell doesn't function as well as it should. And if you have cells that aren't functioning well, then your body's not functioning well. And you create an environment where there's most likely going to be more inflammation, more discomfort. And most all inflammation researchers these days agree that the central pathway to all systemic inflammation is mitochondrial dysfunction. So if your mitochondria isn't functioning properly, you're going to have inflammatory activities in the body, which is going to either exacerbate diseases or cause some sort of discomfort and pain somewhere, systemically or localized. So that's, I'll stop there and let you either pry into more questions or have me say more. But
well, that's good. So I think that's good for the people that have some knowledge. Now let's.
You want to take it down a notch?
Let's take it down a notch,
okay.
And let's just say this. So let's see if I can get it, okay? Because I'm not one of these scientific thinkers. So we've got cells in the body called mitochondria that produce energy, and then we have cascade. We have different chemicals in the body that react to painful stimuli, causing inflammation and pain. And this product blocks that whole cascade. Once the pain has started, when you take this, it chemically, as an amino acid, stops that from happening.
Let me restate what you said. You said a great example. Thank you. So let me say that every cell in the body has mitochondria, a mitochondria in it. And that's right. The engine of that cell. It's what powers that cell to be able to do whatever it's doing. You know, you have brain cells that have mitochondria that help those neurons to think. You have lung cells that have mitochondria in them, and those lung cells are powered to help you breathe. And you have muscle cells that have mitochondria in them, and those mitochondria help the muscles work. And when those mitochondria undergo some sort of trauma, physical trauma from an injury or tissue disruption, or chemical trauma from oxidative stress or things, the mitochondria become unstable. And mitochondrial dysfunction is kind of the central pathway to all pain and inflammation in the body. And if you stabilize the mitochondria, then you typically will stabilize the inflammatory condition in the body. And most of the drugs that are out there, ibuprofen, naproxen, the COX inhibitor drugs, they inhibit the process of pain and inflammation in the body. But that's not a healthy thing to do in the body. You don't want to inhibit things that are a natural process in the body. So what this peptide alpha G does is it, rather than inhibiting something in that process, it goes to the root of it and stabilizes the mitochondria so that it's functioning better, so that you just preempt the inflammatory activity that's going on in the body.
And what makes
Perfect. I
this,
think
and
I
what makes
got
this,
it.
yeah, and what makes this so important, is that delineation
Yes.
that most pharmaceuticals inhibit things. So when we talk about COX and LOX inhibitors, which we talk about as doctors all the time, clients go, biochemistry, I'm going to snooze. But what you have to understand is that these things are like faucets. The COX and the LOX system are like faucets. And so when we're trying to kill pain, we turn one of those off, and that reduces the amount of discomfort that's experienced by the patient. But these are very important regulatory substances. And so what the drug does is it turns the faucet off. And that faucet is actually necessary for the function of your intestinal cells and your kidney cells. So by turning that off, you get less pain, but you also get potential damage, which is individually sensitive. Patients have individual sensitivities to. So you might give a COX inhibitor to one dog and then go into liver failure as a result of that. Or you might give a LOX inhibitor, which tends to be less severe, and get less side effects, but still a potential for side effects. So these peptides are not inhibitory suppressive compounds. They're actually like nutrition to help your mitochondria work better, instead of doing something that damages the mitochondria that we later have to try and fix. And it's so important to understand that every single chronic disease that we treat as veterinarians has its origin point in mitochondrial damage. So if we can treat without damaging mitochondria, if we can consult the mitochondria and say, does this make you happier? Or does this make you less happier? If we can pick those happier things, we're headed more towards better and less towards, adverse effects and things like that. And I think that needs to be really, really understood by everybody, that these products are supportive products as opposed to inhibitory or suppressive products. And I hate to start the show out on that snooze list, but I think that's what we really have to make clear before we start talking about why we use it and what it does.
Wait, I want to say one thing though, real quick, because I want people to understand that whole faucet thing even more, because I think this is one of the most important things about what gets sold in every drugstore around the world, are things that are turning off and damaging. I mean, I think that the more that people understood how much damage each of these things do, they can't not damage at some point, right? So that to me alone.
And in our research, we believe that these compounds that do show toxicity in humans is actually intensified in dogs. That dogs are more susceptible to these organ toxins than humans are. So the veterinarians in the past have had this, I think it's almost probably tugs at their hearts, that they're trying to relieve the dog's discomfort, but they know that they're shortening the dog's life. They know that they're compromising the health, and that these same drugs that are making them more comfortable are actually also killing them. And so to have something that provides an option for holistic care, comfort care, and a better quality of life, and for that dear beloved animal to live as long as possible with a high quality of life, it just, it helps one's conscience.
So I have a question from the pet guardian perspective, just to really maybe completely clarify this, because I think I'm getting it too. We had a dog, a chocolate lab, high climb in McKinley, and for a weight-bearing, bigger dog, he still liked to summit mountains. But at age 11, we noticed he was gimping up the stairs, so we took him to the vet. And that's when we got the bad news that in order to alleviate the discomfort, we would go to pain meds, but unfortunately one of his kidneys wasn't working properly. So that was a clear demarcation for us that he wasn't going to be climbing mountains, and we had to make a choice. So if I'm understanding everything you've said so far, Mark, would he have been a good candidate at that point for AG in your product?
Yes, I believe so, because those COX inhibitors that were mentioned earlier, one of their top toxicities is to the kidneys, to the renal functions. So that's a bad option or choice for an animal that's got that sort of medical challenge or that medical indication. Alpha G will cause no renal toxicity or no issues with that, or hepatic, no liver issues either. So it would be, I think, a reasonable option for a veterinarian to try with an animal like that, and see whether or not it helps.
And what's really important, Anna, is that we want people to begin with the least toxic options. And then if it's not working, then we move into more toxic options, which brings me to a question for you, Mark, which is, how quickly does Alpha G work compared to Aleve? When I've been working outside and I'm really sore and my hip is hurting me, do I go to Aleve or do I go to Alpha G?
Yeah, I'll answer that question both in human and dog context. I still play hockey. I grew up in Minnesota, and after I play a game, oftentimes I'm kind of stiff and sore, and I will use both the capsules after a game, as if I was needing or taking an ibuprofen or something, or an Aleve, and then it's usually one of my knees that's sore afterwards, and I'll rub some of the peptide cream, the Alpha G cream, on my knees as well, and usually within 15 to 30 minutes, I feel a lot better. So that's just quick from a human standpoint. And if I don't, because they're non-toxic, I can take 2 or 3 more, and then I'm certainly going to feel good. We did safety and toxicity testing for the FDA and demonstrated that you couldn't generate adverse events with the compound at any dosing level, because it just metabolizes into its constituent amino acids, which are essential and conditionally essential and very symbiotic with the body. Now, from a dog standpoint, go ahead.
Go ahead. Dog standpoint, go.
From a dog standpoint, I'll give you a typical case study, and the research has shown that usually it's between 1 to 7 days that a dog will have relief. But more often than not, it's 1 to 3 days. And this case study that I'm about to share with you, I was talking to a veterinarian whose own dog had gotten aged enough to where they were uncomfortable and stiff getting up from a nap and couldn't jump up on the couch anymore or whatever. And that veterinarian had the dog on carprofen, a COX inhibitor that was making the dog more comfortable. That was great. But she knew that it was not good for the beloved family member. And she switched, when she heard about Alpha G, she switched the dog from that brand of carprofen that she had the dog on, popular brand name, but I won't mention it, and put the dog on Alpha G. And as comfortable as the dog was on the carprofen, it still wasn't jumping on the couch. Within 2 days, the dog not only was still as comfortable, but was back to jumping up on the couch and on the bed and things. So that veterinarian said, wow, this not only works fast, but it actually worked better than the COX inhibitors that I was giving the dog. So I would say it's a short period of time. It's not like, the glucosamine and chondroitin products and those that work on synovial fluid, they're great. And I think they're a terrific adjunct to an anti-inflammatory, but they don't work for all dogs. And if they're going to work, it usually takes 4 to 8 weeks or so to see some results. This provides pharmaceutical-like relief and that sort of speed as well, but
absolutely
holistically.
So Mark, holistically, and as a sustainability person, I have a question for you. Where does this come from? Are you synthesizing it in the lab? Is it something that is found in plants and people could use, maybe the herbalists could be using this?
Yeah, the good question. The amino acids that make up this peptide are all naturally occurring. But nature rarely puts them together in this peptide form the way that we have. So it's a synthesis, a synthesization. It's a synthesis of these amino acids into a particular peptide that happens to elicit these sorts of mitochondrial support and therefore anti-inflammatory properties. And I'm careful to say this is treating or addressing inflammation that's due to activity or overactivity of a dog, because the FDA doesn't like peptides being referred to as drugs like an ibuprofen, a carprofen, or whatever. But if it's activity, and that's what a dog gets sore from doing too much or whatever, activity-induced pain and soreness and inflammation is something that is approved by the FDA for a non-drug compound to help with.
Excellent. Well, I want to start taking some.
Yeah,
Brendan,
and there's a question
Brendan has
in
a
the
question.
chat of, is it vegan? And yes, it is. It is. The compound is not derived from any animal sources, so it is compliant with vegan or vegetarian lifestyles.
And do you have it for horses?
It's interesting that you asked that. Yes, but not commercially. We have some high-level horse owners and trainers that have heard about this molecule, and horses, they have very little to work with horses. I think what is it? Phenbutazine is one of the only horse anti-inflammatories that's out on the market, and it's also very disruptive to their GI tract, and so it's tough for a horse to be on that. And we have a few stakes level thoroughbred race horses that use alpha G as a part of maintaining or mollifying equine inflammation, and they've had some very good results. But we usually will just make up a side batch, and it's hard. They use the cream version of it as a liniment for the horses, and then we've tried to make everything from alfalfa brownies to a minty appley paste to shoot down their gullets. And it depends on the horse. Some will eat the alfalfa brownies because alpha G doesn't taste very good. Others won't. But and then the equine paste is something that's you have to be really committed to wanting to work with it, because it's not easy. It separates and it becomes challenging, but it does work really well.
Well, I have a good case study if you need another one.
Okay, very good.
So, Mark, question for you.
Yeah.
What else does alpha G potentially do? I know you mentioned it's great as an anti-inflammatory. Where else in the body might that actually show its potential? Is it just inflammatory as far as pain and active as a response to active or wear and tear, or is it possibly in the gastrointestinal system and elsewhere?
It's interesting that you bring that up, because it opens up a door of, again, something that I could talk for days about. I had a gentleman who began taking alpha G for some arthritis in his back, and he called me up after 2 or 3 weeks of using it, and he said, "This has done something to my gut." And I said, "Okay, tell me more about that." And he said, "I have been an IBS sufferer for over 20 years, irritable bowel syndrome." And he said, "When I eat, I have to be near the restroom facilities because there can just be uncomfortable circumstances that arise fairly quickly." And he said, "Since I started taking this, I haven't had a bout of IBS after the first few days." He said, "I think it's done something to my gut." And I said, "Well, IBS is certainly a part of it, is an inflammatory gut condition. And and so I'm guessing that this is helping your gut heal and suppress the inflammation that has been a long-standing issue with you, causing that IBS and causing these culinary discomforts." And so, yes, there are other things in the body that it does that we think are beneficial. inflammation in the body is responsible for so many things, and not just disease states, but exacerbating just general health, and of course, impacting oxidative stress or the oxidation levels of the body. And this peptide seems to help to downregulate a lot of that. We have seen in some studies that there are impacts on toll-like receptors and interleukin and bradykinins and neurological conditions as well, because brain inflammation is certainly a concern in a number of different medical indications or circumstances. So it is, I don't want to say it's a miracle compound, but it certainly is something that strikes at supporting good health or better health in a number of different ways in the body.
Interesting. I have a couple follow-up question. I take a supplement once in a while for focus, and it sounds a lot like alpha G. It's alpha GPC. Is there any correlation to that? Does it have any similarities to how that might work with or compare to alpha GPC?
I am not familiar with alpha GPC. I'll have to look it up. Okay. So I would need to first look at the mechanism of action of that compound and see what they're doing in the body, to see what sort of similarities or comparisons and contrasts there are. But I will take note of that and look at it and respond to that either in writing or at a time in the near future. So thank you for alerting me to that.
No problem.
Go ahead, Brian.
One more question. I want to ask you about how you've combined it possibly with creatinine or creatine. Creatine,
yeah. We have a number of athletes that use the two compounds together, and at the sense of it is that creatine is needed by every cell in the body to function optimally. Your body makes half the creatine that it needs, and in fact, many people don't realize that creatine is a natural molecule in the body. People hear creatine and they think guys, muscle heads, bodybuilders, athletes, or whatever. No, athletes have known that creatine is important for optimal functioning of every cell in the body for a long time, and so they use it for the muscle energy that it provides. But it provides the catalytic energy, the formation of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, for every cell in the body. So your body uses 20% of the creatine in you just to think, for your neurons. Your immune system depends on creatine to have enough functional energy for your T cells to go kill bad cells and keep you healthy. So the body's functional energy system is driven by creatine. So athletes particularly, but anybody who's active and is an exercise enthusiast or fitness enthusiast or just gardens a lot or whatever the case may be, you have the ability to have better endurance and recovery with creatine. But when you do those things, you generate inflammation. You're usually tearing down or stressing tissues, and that generates an inflammatory response, which is part of the healthy processes of the body. So with the creatine supplying more functional energy to do things, then the alpha G comes along and helps to support the body's inflammation response, so that it can go through that and help repair and recover all of the stressed or traumatized tissue in the body in a manner that is as expedient and efficient and as healthy as possible. So those two are really key compounds that kind of work beautifully in unison together: the creatine and the alpha G.
That makes a lot of sense. And I was going to actually just contribute real quickly, Brennan. The alpha GPC it's a supplement. It's a biochemical that actually stimulates acetylcholine secretion. So people theorize that it helps with a lot of other things, but it's completely different from the peptide and from the mechanism of action. And actually, there's not really very good research for that product, I think, compared to what we're hearing about this one, which is interesting because we don't have an LD50, because it's not an LD50 is, for viewers, is what level of that you have to give before half the patients die. And so it sounds like it's impossible to have an LD50 substance because it's safe enough. We don't have to worry about that. I also had a follow-up question on this. Have you done research, or do you have anecdotal reports? My practice treats a tremendous amount of chronic disease, specifically cancer. Do you have any kind of studies for cancer pain, like osteosarcomas, which are harder to regulate pain with?
Yeah. I have, there's some cancer research with some of these compounds, but it's not to the point of peer reviewed and published at this point that I can speak to it with the same sort of clinical veracity or that I can with some of the research. I will give you a couple of case studies, though, that have been reported to me by one of them came out of the Big Cancer Institute in Boston. Why am I drawing a blank on its name? It'll come to me in a minute.
Like Sloan Kettering, or
it's not Sloan Kettering. It'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, matter. Yeah. So
just tell the story. Just tell the story.
So the story. This is a case of a cancer patient that was going through one of the more aggressive procedures. Dana-Farber Cancer Center. Yes. In Boston. And this patient was going through R-CHOP therapy, which involves a cocktail of very potent, powerful chemotherapies that really are toxic. They kill cancer very well, but they're very hard on the patients. And this is a case where the patient started on their own, unbeknownst to me, started taking our creatine, which is a particular concentrated creatine, much better bioavailability than creatine monohydrate. And was taking alpha G because they had heard about what R-CHOP therapy, and particularly doxorubicin, which they refer to as the red devil of chemos, can do in terms of mitochondrial damage. And this patient, other than days of infusion, didn't miss a day of work. Normally these aggressive chemotherapies will wipe people out, and they will be, curled up in a fetal position in bed, hardly able to lift their head off the pillow, which is sad, but that's what's necessary to kill some of these aggressive cancers. And this, on days where the doctors and the nurses would have expected this patient to be going through what they call TCD, or toxic crash day, which is usually 3 or 4 or 5 days after infusion, when they hit just the worst symptoms of fatigue and discomfort, that patient would be out cutting their grass or something. And so the mitochondrial stabilization and the cellular energy that was afforded by the alpha G and the creatine simply seemed to help that patient endure the toxic ravages of the chemotherapy better. And that has since been replicated in some anecdotal case studies where other patients, the doctors and the nurses would say, gosh, you're doing better than we would have expected.
And that's a big advantage of a lot of integrated cancer protocols, is we can use certain herbs to reverse chemotherapy resistance. We can help patients be more comfortable. And these are things that are really well established. And unfortunately, we still need more penetration into the medical community so that veterinarians know about these things. And unfortunately, a lot of times people enter into that field not through highly level evidence-based medicine, because they haven't been established, but more from client testimonial or veterinarians who have used it that then stimulate the research project. So we do a lot of cancer, and I think we're going to have to look at this more for those patients, because we oftentimes think of them as more refractory to pain, and in fact, we just may need to change our means of approach.
Yeah, and I will say that you hit on something that I think is very important, and I can't speak as well to doctors of veterinary medicine, but medical doctors in 4 years of medical school, I think might get 4 hours, a half a day of nutritional guidance and training. So these are things that they just haven't had the opportunity. to delve into as much. And so then you have, as you said, people who are focused in this area, but maybe they haven't had as much training. It's been more anecdotal, and bringing together great training on these important topics of nutrition and supplementation and herbology and all these, I think is a real open pathway and channel to a better horizon in the future.
Well, and that's what we're here for. I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
literally trying to highlight people like you who are doing this kind of stuff. Evidence-based medicine and doctors rely on double-blind, placebo-controlled, large trials. You can go to PubMed to look at a treatment for breast cancer in women, and you're going to see a small studies, 20,000 women. You go to veterinary journals and look at 100 or 200 veterinary patients. So it's going to take millions of dollars to achieve that kind of evidence base before doctors convert. And if a product is not dangerous, and might be of use in relieving pain in particular, which is one of the most common things people are afraid of, there's nothing wrong with saying, like, let's give it a try. And if your dog's more comfortable in 2 to 4 weeks, let's use that. And if it's not, we can augment it with something else in a more multimodal, multiple kind of approach to the pain that they're suffering. So this is really, I think, tremendously useful information.
It sounds
Mark,
incredible. Yeah. I had
sorry,
a
Mark,
really quick basic question. If a dog or cat or an animal or human patient is on a different supplement, let's say glucosamine or carprofen, would it be important to discontinue that before taking alpha G?
No, one of the things that we did in the studies for the FDA on safety and toxicity was look at drug interactions or contraindications, and we basically found none.
That's amazing.
It's very it's very congruent with other supplements like a glucosamine or chondroitin, and while it doesn't interfere with or have contraindications with carprofen or some of those pharmaceuticals, it just simply largely alleviates the need for them, or at least would allow you to titer them down significantly to where there's less risk profile to the patient. We have not, in 20 plus years of research, we've not found anything that causes complications with alpha G, or anything that alpha G causes complications with.
That's amazing. Really amazing.
So I've got another question for you. How out there are you with this? Are there very many veterinary clinics using this? Are any of the veterinary distributors distributing it?
Yep, good question. There are a few, I would say, when I say a few, less than 100 holistic or integrative health veterinarians around the country that are using it right now. But those that are evangelical about it. They talk about how most, if not all, of their patients have been able to be transitioned off of the more toxic pharmaceuticals and have very positive clinical outcomes with alpha G. And we don't right now. It's either just available in products on our website or on Amazon, or Chewy. I think it's on. The marketing people know those answers better than I. But it is. I would say it's still in its nascent form of the market knowing about it. And but those that do, we're pleased to report, are very enthused about its clinical efficacy.
Mark, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have to close out this conversation. Thank you, panel, for the amazing. And I guess my last question would be, how can our audience, you've mentioned any place we can go to maybe find out who and how and a little bit more information about how we should be taking it, or can you give us where we should stay in touch with you? Let's start there.
Sure. Probably the easiest is through the main Alpha G website, which is still, it's pretty lean because we've got more publications that are coming out, but it's canineactive.com, and no E on the end of active, or the Vireo website, Vireo, Vireo Systems. Vireo is a Latin word for health, but vireosystems.com is also an easy way to get in touch with either me with questions or some of our team And we've got a great group of scientific advisors that also help to field questions and things. So happy to engage at any time.
Thank you. That is perfect. If you at home would like to be a part of the conversation, you can email your questions to our website. Thank you, Mark, for helping us raise our animal IQ. And we so appreciate your contribution to the lives of humans and animals. According to Charles Darwin, the love of all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. We hope you'll join us again soon. Until then, love your pets. Medical information obtained from our website or the live show is not intended to be a substitute for professional care. If your pet has or you suspect they might have an illness or other medical condition, you should consult a healthcare provider. The opinions expressed on this TV program are not necessarily those of Smart Pet Talk, this TV show, or their sponsors. For all questions or info on sponsorship, email us at info@smartpettalk.com or visit our website at smartpettalk.com.